And I'm delighted to welcome the Executive Chairman of Tellurian. He's here at the headquarters of the International Energy Forum, Charif Souki. Lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Great to see you, Eithne. Thank you very much.
Now, of course, there's lots going on in the market, and we've been very, very busy here talking about the oil and gas market, looking at the future of energy. But when you look towards the future of energy, I want you to give me your near-term predictions. And we'll talk about long-term in a few minutes. I know it could take a while, but let's have a look at where the near-term is. And what do you think?
I think we've gotten to the point now that we've expected for the last 2 years. I think COVID kind of disrupted things, and it took longer to absorb all the extra energy that was in the market, but that has now happened. So in the near term, we're going to continue to have dislocations in the gas market that are very painful on a global basis, and slowly, as people are moving away from natural gas and to oil, you're going to continue to see oil demand increase, the excess capacity in the system being absorbed. I think by the summer, we'll be in a situation where the oil market and the gas market will have equalized, and we'll be in a situation where we'll probably be equally expensive for oil and gas.
Now, when we look in the longer term, there's a lot of aspirations out there, and there's dates on 2030, 2060, 2070. Everybody, yes, of course, is looking in the right direction in terms of decarbonising. But there's some harsh realities, I think, there as well that perhaps not everybody is paying attention to, and maybe governments need to pay more attention to. Talk to us about the long-term, perhaps fears that are there at the moment, or what we should be paying attention to.
One of the first things that I learned when I got involved in the energy business is it is money that finds energy. The rest follows. Geology, geophysics, technology, all of this comes when the money is there. And what we have done for the last decade is invest too little into this sector. Last year, we've invested globally $350 billion in the energy sector when we should have invested $1 trillion. So the issue is going to be, how do we get back to investing a sufficient amount of money to make sure that we don't run short of supply? The demand is going to continue to increase. The supply is not following. You've seen all the reports from all the international oil companies. They're still under pressure to distribute their cash to their shareholders in the form of dividends or stock repurchases. Their capex probably is about $100 billion, so it's 10% of what is required. The rest needs to come from somewhere else. The national oil companies normally are a very important component of this, but they were like everybody else. They were running short on cash. They needed the money for other things, and therefore they did not make the investments. Now the national oil companies are going to start making a lot of money also. They don't have shareholders except their countries, and therefore what strategic decisions they make in terms of where they want to invest their money will be critical. I think it's going to take a long time to get to the $1 trillion a year.
Well, clearly there's some gaps in the market, and again, that investment absolutely essential. When we see, I think, the pain that people are going through, perhaps in Northern Europe at the moment, that's where they've felt a lot of it. But, you know, you've always talked about this is a people market, and, you know, when people feel the pain, they tend to react a lot more. Right now, when we look at high energy prices for the various reasons they are, do you think that I suppose the narrative might begin to shift a little bit, where people might understand a little bit more what's needed in this sector?
I think now that the problems have come to Europe, we're going to have a competing narrative. I don't think the narrative that says we want to get rid of hydrocarbon is going to disappear completely, because that is almost a religious conviction. But it has no bearing on what the reality is. Until a year ago, we were ignoring the pain that you have in places like Africa or Asia. When you look at the pictures of New Delhi with the pollution, where you have to send kids back home because it's too polluted to take them to school, we ignored all this. Now it's come home to Europe, and all of a sudden we can't ignore it anymore. There is pain everywhere when you make bad decisions like this that have an impact on everybody, on everyday life for normal people.
Talk to me about the value of outlooks. All of the international companies do outlooks. The International Energy Agency do their outlooks. OPEC does it. And now the International Energy Forum bring the outlooks together here to put a sense of comparison to them. Over the years, how important are those outlooks, and do they serve as, I suppose, a guideline for investors like you and key players in the industry?
Well, I think the outlooks are important because they create the foundation for decision making. But at the end of the day, you have to decide which one of the outlooks you're going to believe and how you're going to prepare for things. And this is where sometimes, it depends where it comes from, the outlook is not good enough because it leads you to the wrong decisions. But it's an essential foundation. At the end of the day, the human factor is going to come and say, this is the outlook that I believe.
Now, talk to us about the gas market, your absolute favorite topic in the world. And, when we look at, and you talk yourself about, the growth in energy demand. And I think if we just look around us and we look at more people moving into a middle class, there's going to be certainly near medium-term demand. What do you say when you look at some of these projections that, gas will reach peak demand shortly?
Well, in 100 years, maybe. So it all depends on your definition of shortly. If you look at what is happening today, everybody is focused on saying that natural gas is going to be reduced because we're going to increase electricity. Well, with all due respect, electricity is not a primary source of energy. You have to choose your source of energy for electricity. And as we've seen in many cases now, including California, the growth in electricity is not supported by a primary source of energy, and it creates problems. So California went from being very, very concerned to make sure that they eliminated the combustion engine in a short period of time, in the next 10 years, and they're making things more and more difficult. And then all of a sudden they realize that they have no source of electricity anymore, and they have to start building diesel power plants and natural gas power plant and bring them back because it's essential. EVs are going to require more electricity. Where is it going to come from? In California, we've saturated nuclear. We don't want it anymore. We've saturated hydropower. That is done. So what are we left with? Windmills and solar panel, they're intermittent. You need a baseload supply source. And that is natural gas, oil, or coal. Those are your choices today.
Now, talk to me about the big markets in the world and where that demand is coming from. You look at the U.S., biggest consumer globally as well, definitely up there, one of the top biggest consumers. But they're also a producer as well. Do you think they should be doing more in the United States at the moment?
Absolutely. We have a resource that is sufficient for 100 years worth of consumption. And we cannot be blaming OPEC for not producing oil and Russia for not producing gas. And at the same time, with the resource that we have, take the position that we don't want to increase our resource as well. We don't know it, we don't accept it, it's very new to us, but we really are part of OPEC Plus. We really are part of the major gas producers that have an impact on how the rest of the world lives. And I accept that rich countries have a responsibility towards the rest of the world. We are one of the rich countries.
And of course that comes with a lot of responsibility as well. We look at the rich countries and sadly we look at a lot of poor countries who simply don't have access to energy. Do you see that as a big concern? Because here we are in 2022 and really that shouldn't be happening.
You are absolutely right. And all it's going to cause on a long-term basis is migrations of people. Because if they cannot get the facilities that we need, that we take for granted, they're going to look. And today everybody knows everything. Everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has a cell phone that actually serves as an encyclopedia, as an immediate transfer of information, as to find out what you want and find out what you want to say to people that you can do with your cell phone. So everybody knows what's happening around the world. The simple answer is if you don't provide the living standards that we're accustomed to, they're coming to see us. they're coming to move to where it's comfortable.
And again, that will put a lot of pressure on resources, and indeed, there'll be a lot more demand in the future. It's almost like, just look at the reality, I suppose. You need to remind people more of this.
And I think what's important, we're not just doing a service to the rest of the world because we're a rich country on a resource base. We are also doing a service to ourselves, because if we don't treat people the right way around the world and we don't accept our responsibilities, we are also going to pay the price in a different way.
Now, you talk about this region, and particularly Saudi Arabia, and you look at the great opportunity that's here in terms of, funding, investment, and indeed, I suppose for some new companies, new technology, a lot to happen here. Just tell me a little bit about, where you think this country is going to go.
I think what is happening in Saudi Arabia right now is phenomenal. They are starting to see the beginning of this resource scarcity that is happening with the commensurate increase into the financial fortunes. For the first time in 2022, Saudi Arabia's budget is going to be in surplus.
And of course, you talk with the energy minister many times, and when we look at Prince Abdulaziz and the focus that he has on energy, and also looking at the greening of energy, they're really looking right across the board on diversifying energy here. You think that's really the way that it has to go as well, and the work that he's doing?
I think we can aspire to do the things that are necessary in order to make everything better. I think the first and most important responsibility of energy-rich countries is to see what they can do to help the rest of the world that doesn't have the same luck to get to similar living standards if it's possible. And I think they will be in a position to do that extremely well. They have the population base, they have the education base. They continue to improve this. They've had now 40 years to come out pre-energy to build the institutions, build the universities, build the hospitals, build the infrastructure, and educate their people, which they've been phenomenally successful with.
And finally, before I let you go, we look at the work of the International Energy Forum, really, bringing producers and consumers together and opening up that dialogue. How important is it that the International Energy Forum continue this and possibly expand it?
It's critical, because until now, the global institutions have been mostly OECD countries with a very narrow interpretation of what is public good. It is very, very, very important to include the rest of the world in this dialogue, and this is what IEF does.